Okay guys, this is the second page of the Unit 8 review packet. Notice our first section here is all parallelograms, so I'm really quickly just going to write all of my rules. I know that opposite sides are parallel. I know that opposite sides are congruent. I know that opposite angles are congruent. I know that consecutive angles are supplementary. And I also know that diagonals bisect each other. So here we go. Let's look at number 6. Solve for the following angles below. Well, I'm not even going to worry about what it's asking for. I'm just going to see how much information I can fill in. I know opposite angles are congruent. So I know that this has to be, oopsies, I already messed up, 110 degrees. Sorry, I'm gonna fix that really fast. So we know that that angle has to be 110 degrees because of the fact that it's opposite angles with angle Q. So it's gonna be 110 degrees. We also know that consecutive angles have to be supplementary. So if I were to cover this up, I know that this angle, angle Q, and this whole angle here are supplementary. Well, if I've already used up 110 and I take that away from 180, I get that this whole thing has to be 70. Well, notice 30's already been used up, which means I'm going to have 40 degrees left over. So again, remember this angle and this whole angle have to add up to 180. This whole angle is 70 now. This whole angle is 110. That adds up to 180. Let's think about how I need to fill in over here now. If I do my alternate interior angle, so remember this side is parallel to this side, which means when I make my Z, it's going to capture, remember, my alternate interior angles. That means that this right here has to be 30 degrees. And if I did alternate interior angles going this way, I'd get that this was 40, but this still has to add up to 70. So let's see if we can answer our questions now. The measure of angle QRP, the measure of angle QPR is 40 degrees. The measure of angle S is 110 degrees. And the measure of angle PRS is 40 degrees. Okay, number 7, find the value of x and y given the following diagram. Well, we know AE is 3x. We know that EC is 2x plus 9. We know that DE is 5y. And I know that EB is 20. Well, remember, for a parallelogram, diagonals bisect each other. So that means this diagonal cuts this one in half, and this diagonal cuts this one in half. I don't even know where to put those markings. Which means 3x equals 2x plus 9. And 5y equals 20. So remember, diagonals bisect each other. So over here, remember, we use a lot of angle rules. So I primarily use these two angle rules right here. I also use that the opposite sides are parallel. For this one's all about diagonals, so I use this rule over here. Well, down here it says use the following picture to answer the following two questions. So I'm going to use this picture for both. It says QR is 3x plus 5. PS is 4x minus 25. Well, think about it. These are opposite sides. We're dealing with side rules now. Opposite sides are congruent. So I can say that 3x plus 5 is equal to 4x minus 25. I'm going to subtract the 3x over. I'm going to add 25 to this side, so I get x equals 30. Well, if I plug things back in, QR is equal to 3x, well, x is 30, plus 5. So QR is going to be 95. And we know QR and PS have to be the same, so PS will also be 95, but we could also check by plugging it in. We're going to get 4 times 30, which is 120, minus 25 is 95. Okay, well now it's telling me that the measure of angle P for my next problem is 2x plus 5. Oh, sorry, 2x plus 3. This is Q is 7x minus 12. I know that we've already used x, but this is a brand new problem, so we're using red for this problem. Well, because these angles are consecutive, they're next to each other, it means that together they're going to add up to 180. Give me 9x minus 9 equals 180. I'm going to add 9 to both sides. and then I'm going to divide by 9, and I'm going to get that x equals 21. Now, we don't want the value of x. We want the measure of angle R and the measure of angle S. So let's take a look. If I were to plug 21 back in for x, 2 times 21 is 42, plus 3 is 45. Well, opposite angles are congruent, so that has to be 45. I'm going to plug in 21 here. 21 times 7 is 147, minus 12 is 135. Well, that's good because these add up to 180. That means this will also be 135. So I can say that the measure of angle R is 45, and the measure of angle S is 135. Let's keep going. Okay, now we're on to rectangles. Now rectangles have 2 new things that we need to keep in our brains. The first is that all 4 angles are congruent. Specifically, they're all going to be 90 degrees. And my diagonals are congruent. Now, we're still going to use all of our rules from parallelograms, but we just have 2 additional rules we can use as well because we have a rectangle. So let's see what they've told us. We know that the measure of angle 1 is 50 degrees, so here's a 50-degree angle. Well, we know that this angle together has to be 90. That's what a rectangle is. All 4 of the big angles have to be 90 degrees, so that means that this has to be 40 degrees. So angle 2 is 40 degrees. Let's see what else we can do. I know, for instance, this side is parallel to this side because it's a parallelogram. Okay. And I know that my alternate interior angles have to be congruent. So angle 3 is going to have to be 50 degrees. Which means angle 4 is going to have to be 40 degrees because, again, these are going to be 90. Okay, let's see what else we can come up with. Well, I know that because it's a rectangle, my diagonals are going to be congruent. We also know because it's a parallelogram that the diagonals bisect each other. So let's pretend this is 10. This will also be 10, right? And if they bisect each other, it means I'm going to have 5 and 5, 5 and 5. My diagonal halves, all these pieces are going to be the same. Okay. Now, the way I like to think about it is whenever I have an isosceles triangle, the 2 base angles will be the same. So since this and this are the same, the angles opposite them will be the same. This is going to be a 40-degree angle. Here's another isosceles triangle. Because these sides are the same, the angles opposite them will be the same. This will be 50 degrees. Same thing up here. This will end up being 50 degrees. Okay, we've got 2 more to do. Well, if I want to figure out what angle 8 is, I know that these 3 have to add up to 180. I've already used up 80, so there's 100 left. And I know that these 2 have to make a linear pair. They add up to 180, so 70, or angle 7 has to be 80 degrees. Okay, in rectangle PQRS, here's P, here's Q, here's R, here's S. Remember, we always label it around, so wherever I start, I have to go P, then Q, then R, then S. So P, then Q, then R, then S. Diagonal PR and SQ, so find the diagonals, or sorry, those are the diagonals. If PR is 4x minus 10 and SQ is 7x minus 40, we need to solve for x. Well, we know the diagonals are congruent because it's a rectangle. So I can say 4x minus 10 equals 7x minus 40. I'm going to subtract 4x onto this side. I'm going to add 40 to this side, and I get x equals 10. Okay. We need to find PR, so all we're going to do is plug it into this formula. So I have 4x minus 10. For SQ, I have 7x minus 40. And our diagonals should be the same, so that's good. Okay, so that's the end of page 2 or side 2. I'll start a video on side 3 in a second.